All right, this video is about vertebrae, and specifically the one that we have here, which is a cervical vertebra. So the navigation on this is not quite as sophisticated as I would like, but well, that's not bad. I can do a little bit of that. Okay, so usually what I like to do is twirl it to the side so you get a lateral view, but that's the thing I'm having a hard time doing here. So maybe if I make it like that. Yeah, I don't know. This orbital navigation is not my favorite, but let's start with the basics. So you will need to be able to tell cervical vertebrae from thoracic vertebrae from lumbar vertebrae, um, and also know some features. Fortunately, though, there's some easy ways to do this. So I'm starting at the top in the neck, which is why it's called cervical, and then we're going to work our way down. So this is a tutorial about cervical vertebrae in general. I'll make a separate video, I think, for the atlas and the axis, which is C1 and C2, because those are some special weird ones. Now, a quick grammar and spelling note. This is the plural form. So if you want to pluralize something in Latin, you generally put AE at the end of it. Not always, but most of the time. This is a major error that I see students and humans in general making when they are trying to communicate about this bone, or these bones rather. They will say vertebrae when they mean vertebra, which is just one of them. So if you want to sound smart and not screw up your practical, make sure that you understand the difference between plural and singular. So cervical vertebrae have the following things in common that I'm about to show you. I'm going to use this singular cervical vertebra to demonstrate those things. Okay? All right. So first things first, that part is the vertebral body. So the vertebral body is a sort of a cylindrical disc shape, and this is the part that actually stacks up to be load-bearing, so support weight, and also provide a articulating surface that is load-bearing, forming the columnar portion of your spine. The hole right here, actually let's do holes in a different color just for differentiation purposes. So this big hole is the vertebral foramen. And this is the hole that when you have an articulated spine, the bodies are all stacked on top of each other. The vertebral foramina, plural, collectively become a bony tube through which your spinal cord passes. So it's a protective housing for your delicate spinal cord, which is an important part of your central nervous system. So note, this is hole number one. There's also, boop, boop, two more. So these are the transverse foramina. So that's because they're in a thing called the transverse process, which is the bone that encloses them, and therefore in the transverse plane. So that gives us hole number 2 and 3. So the reason I'm making a point about those numbers is that if you look at a vertebra and you're like, which kind is it? If you see 3 holes and not just one, then it's a cervical vertebra. The other 2 types only have 1 hole, and that's the vertebral foramen. So that makes things nice and easy. Right off the bat, if you just count the holes, you can quickly establish whether it's cervical or not. And then the rest of the work is just narrowing it down, right? So since we have 3 holes here, I can be confident that it is a cervical vertebra. The other thing that you're going to notice is this structure, this sticky outy bit, which is the spinous process. It has two sides, it's forked. So some of them are more forked than others. This isn't the most forked one I've ever seen. Some of them look more like this, where if I was to draw it, it would be like so. But regardless, you only see this bifurcation of the spinous process in the cervical spine. The spinous processes in the rest of the spine are not forked, they're just one. So if you see three holes and you see a forked or deviated spinous process, odds are you're looking at a cervical vertebra. And then you just need to figure out, is it a regular one or is it one of the special ones, C1 or C2? So that's this view. Oh, and let's also label the transverse process. And then this piece of bone, and also this one over here, is the superior articular process. So superior because it's at the top, so we're looking down on this vertebra from the top. Articular means this is the part of this vertebra that articulates or forms a joint with its upstairs neighbor. And process just means a bony extension or projection, something that sticks out. So superior articular process literally describes its position on the vertebra, its purpose, articulation, and the type of bony feature it is. That's handy. So that's the features that you can see from the superior view. Let's flip this around to the extent that it's possible to do so. Okay, that's not so bad. So if I turn it, yeah, this is the underside. So let me just write that so we know. Inferior aspect. So this is as if we're looking up from below this vertebra. So we can see some of the same features, including the vertebral body and the transverse foramina. We can also see some stuff that we weren't able to see before. So if we look at the spinous process, what we'll see is that on either side of it, there's a thin, flat sheet of bone that connects the spinous process to the rest of the vertebra, and these are called the vertebral laminae. So remember, AE is plural. If I wanted to say singular, it would be vertebral lamina. Just an A, no E. So that forms part of the boundary of the vertebral foramen. The piece of bone that connects the vertebral body to the laminae is a short piece of bone here and here, which are the pedicles, singular being pedicle. And then this feature here and also this one here is the inferior articular process. So I'm just abbreviating it on this side just because I don't want to write the same thing over and over again. So that's what you can see from the inferior aspect as opposed to the superior. So the inferior articular process is going to be the bony extension with a facet on it, so a smooth spot visible here, that allows this vertebra to articulate with its downstairs neighbor. Okay, so that is cervical vertebrae. So a couple more programming notes, because it's always helpful to have context for this. Let's see if I can twirl this in a way that makes sense for what I'm about to describe. Maybe. Ooh. No, I just really want a lateral view of this that's like in the horizontal plane, but okay, whatever, sure. Okay, so let me give you an axis to work with. This is the spinous process, so this is the, oh, and now I suddenly can't write anymore? Posterior side. The side with the vertebral body is the anterior side. This is superior towards the head, and this is inferior towards the lower spine. So that just gives you your axis. So what you can see is that here's the transverse process, and you know that it has a hole in it. So the question is, why? Why does the C-spine have 3 holes when all of the other vertebral types only have the 1? The answer is vertebral arteries. So there's 1 vertebral artery per side, and what they do is they go up through the transverse foramina into the skull, and they provide an auxiliary blood supply to the brain from your main one. So if I was to draw a schematic diagram of this, if this is the heart, I'm just going to make this very, very simple. And let's see how well I can draw a head. Ooh. Okay, that's not so bad. And let's draw a little cerebrum. Yeah, there we go. So, coming off of the heart, there is the aorta, which loops up and then back down. So we have the common carotid arteries, and then the external, which stay superficial and supply the edge of your head on the outside, and then the internal carotids, which go up to your brain here. So that's kind of the main blood supply. So the internal carotid artery connects up to your brain, supplies oxygen-rich blood to your brain. But what if something happens to this? The internal carotid branches off of the common carotid, which is this part, and that's just buried in your neck neat. There's no bone surrounding it. So it's protected by the musculature of your neck, but not that great. So if something should happen to it, you also have running up through your C-spine, through the transverse foramina, the vertebral arteries, which go up through those holes and also supply the brain. So like with many things in anatomy and physiology, if you have a structure like the brain and the cerebrum that is very important and is impossible to fully live without, then there are often redundant systems in place to make sure that it is able to stay alive and perform homeostasis. So this is just an example of that. You just have a backup blood supply. And that is reflected in the 3-holedness of cervical vertebrae. So that is the reason why. Alrighty, so stay tuned for the next couple videos, which we'll discuss how you can tell if something is a thoracic vertebra, how you can tell if something is a lumbar vertebra, and then we'll also have a look at C1 and C2, which have some special features as well. And I might do T12 if I can find it also, but I haven't found a 3D model of it yet. So thank you for your attention, and I will see you in the next video.